Whether it's out in the workplace, in your own home, in your own head, it doesn't matter where you are, because at some point negativity is something we all have to deal with. And I think this is as good a time as any to have a conversation about it. Welcome to the My Slice of Life podcast. I'm Sharon O'Neill and I am your very positive Highland host. I've been accused of being too positive, in fact, and I think it's often mistaken for naivety, but it really isn't. There are very good reasons why I work hard to look for and maintain a positive outlook in life. That's what this whole podcast is really about, and I'll discuss it a bit more as we delve into this topic of negativity. Throughout my life, I've had this uncanny knack of attracting negative people, and it hasn't been on purpose. It's never been an actual goal of mine, but it's happened anyway. In college, in the workplace, even growing up, I was surrounded by negativity, and let me tell you, friends, it weighs heavy. That is some dark, heavy energy to be around, and it's exhausting. So let's start by looking at this word negativity a bit more. Well, it can come from external sources like criticism, bad news, or toxic work environment, and we'll be coming back to that in a bit more detail in just a moment. But it can be internal too, self-doubt, fear, frustration. But here's the kicker. Negativity doesn't just make you feel bad, it has a measurable impact on your productivity. Studies show that when you're stuck in a negative mindset, your cognitive abilities can take a hit. That means less focus, slower problem solving, and even impaired memory. Now, when I was doing the research for this episode, everything to do with negativity focused on the workplace, and I'm just going to come to some of those main points in a second, but I also want to look at our own negativity and how it affects us in our own homes too. How does a negative outlook affect productivity at home, and what can we do about it? But I am going to start with negativity in the workplace. What does it look like? Have you ever worked in a really negative place? I mean, maybe that's something you deal with every day. In one of my jobs, and I will not say which one, I sat next to a woman who I came to see as an energy vampire. She could literally suck the life force clean out of you with their negativity. I've met a lot of people like that. You can probably name a few right now. We all know them. So how does this negativity show itself in a workplace? Well, I went through a lot of websites, and there were a few common answers which came up time and time again. One site I saw was Wrike.com. That's W-R-I-K-E. And in the article, it says one thing to look out for is decreased productivity. In the post, there's a link to a study from Michigan State University which concluded that, quote, negative-minded workers can become mentally fatigued and experience a decline in productivity as a result, end quote. I don't really think we need a university to tell us that. We probably see this all the time. I mean, you just have to go into your local supermarket and you can see which employees just can't be bothered. They don't want to be there. You know who the negative ones are. It stands out a mile. The article also highlights reduced employee engagement, again due to this emotional exhaustion. But it also discusses the problem with increased employee turnover. I mean, that makes sense because if someone is miserable in their job, they're going to leave eventually. Here's a quote from the article which explains it a little bit better. One study conducted by Peakon found that if employees could change one thing about their organisation, it would be the office environment they work in. A separate study found that employees who rate their office work culture poorly are 24% more likely to leave. End quote. I want to go through a short list here with you now and see if any of these are familiar to you in your workplace. The one you have now or places you've worked before, okay? Gossip. Straight in with a biggie. I've worked in places which were literally fueled by gossip. And yes, it was an extremely toxic place to be. You found yourself getting caught up in it without even meaning to be, and you knew the minute your back was turned, you'd be next on their hit list. It really affects morale, and gradually the whole place just becomes a toxic stink hole. I think this is probably one of the worst things about working with other people. Sounds quite sad, that, doesn't it? But it's true. It seems to be part of the human character, but I can't figure out why. If you know, then please let me know. But why does a group always need to have a scapegoat or a common enemy? What is that? What's that all about? Because that was one of the hardest things for me to deal with in most of my jobs. If I'm being really honest here, hell, in for a penny, in for a pound and all that, I found it was worse among women. Honestly, when I worked with male colleagues, it tended to be just banter or stupid jokes, that sort of thing. And obviously I'm talking about the discussions that weren't to do with the job itself. Men just didn't gossip as much. Not all of them, but the majority. Like I said earlier, this has just been my experience. Yours might be completely different. But it does make me very wary about working in an all-female workplace in the future, because it was really bad. And another major cause of negativity in the workplace is bullying, more typically from the top down. You may have experienced this yourself. The boss who continually treats staff like garbage and still thinks this is going to produce a productive and happy team. One of the worst places I saw this sort of thing was in a hospital I worked in. Everyone was terrified to say anything, and if you did, well, you were labelled a troublemaker. Ask me how I know. Okay, don't ask me, you know exactly what I mean by that. Here are a few more causes of negativity in the workplace. Lack of recognition and appreciation. So if employees who feel undervalued and unappreciated, they may become negative and therefore disengaged. Poor communication and lack of transparency. This can lead to misunderstandings, mistrust, and negativity. Unfair treatment and perceived inequality. Note that perceived inequality. If you think you're always being given the crap work to do while happy Karen over there gets another easy day, you're not likely to stay a happy little joy bunny for long, are you? Then there's high workload and stress, and I've talked about this before in this season, but excessive workload and stress can lead to burnout, and there's nothing positive about that. Then there's poor leadership and management. Ineffective leadership and management can create a negative work environment leading to low morale and high turnover. How many good bosses have you had? I bet the number's not that high, sadly. Then we come to lack of opportunities for growth and development. It doesn't take long before people start becoming disillusioned and begin to look elsewhere. There's also poor conflict resolution. Unresolved conflicts and poor conflict resolution, they can lead to negativity and a toxic work environment. There's also lack of respect, and I think that one really does speak for itself. Sometimes I'd be in a job and I would see the way the management were treating staff, and it would just amaze me at the disrespect they would show their workforce, and then they wondered why people left. Then there are the external factors such as personal issues and stress. After all, we're talking about a workplace filled with human beings who all have their own lives, their own families, their own problems going on too, and we can't just switch off the minute we walk through the door. So do any of these sound familiar to you? A workplace that has these sorts of things going on will see increased sick leave. It will have reduced productivity, low morale, and what could be a really good cohesive team will feel more like Mutiny on the Bounty. It's not good. It could even be small things which you don't really notice that much. The constant complaints, the nippy criticism, the finger pointing and the blame games. We really need to pay attention to these sorts of things because these quickly escalate into some of the bigger problems that I've just listed. And it's all negative, and it does reduce the productivity of that environment. The bottom line in the workplace is we tend to rise or fall to the level of the people we are with. And you can't make a negative person a positive one, so it's best to avoid them if you can, or at least limit contact with them. So if that's a negativity from others in the workplace, what about our own internal negativity? This is actually a huge topic, and it's a huge issue for all of us at some point in our lives. Our thoughts have enormous impact on our emotions, which in turn affect our actions. So let me give an example of this. A thought might be, I should lose weight. I look awful, but I haven't got the willpower, so I know I can't do it. I'll always be this size. This leads to emotions like feeling miserable, feeling worthless, you're deflated, so in turn the actions are probably going to be eating more comfort food to make you feel better. Now what if we turn that around and try thinking things like, I'd like to lose a bit of weight, I'll be more comfortable maybe the next size down. I'm bound to lose some if I put my mind to it. This will lead to feeling excited, motivated, and as a result, you're much more likely to eat more healthily and make better choices to help you reach your target. That's a huge difference, and it all comes down to how we think. And before I go any further, I just want to let you know that if you use the link in the description and go to the Buy Me a Coffee page, in the shop, you'll find a couple of freebies there you can download to help you bring more positivity in your life. They're totally free, there's no obligation whatsoever. It was just a little something to help people bring a little bit more positivity into their day if they were struggling to do it themselves. So check them out and just see if they're any use to you. The problem is, this negative self-talk, it happens all the time. We put ourselves down constantly and we don't even notice we're doing it. And the worst part is, it's automatic. It just happens. It's like our default setting is constantly pointing to doom. And that is why I have said right at the beginning that I work every day to be positive. I have had to retrain myself to look at things differently, and you can too. And it's not being naive. It's not switching off to everything. It's not letting myself be pulled under by all the doom and gloom, because it's too easy to let that happen, and it does take a little bit of effort, but it's possible. I mean, have you ever been in the situation where you've been working on something? I mean, it could be a project at home, a new menu you're trying, something like that. Then someone comes along, tries the food, or checks out your painting, points out a bit you've missed, or some other problem that they have with it. What's your first thought? What instantly goes through your head? Is it, that's okay, I can sort it? Or is it more like, I never get these sorts of things right, I'm just no good at this sort of thing, don't know why I bother trying? Sound familiar? Those negative sorts of thoughts jump in so quickly, we need to be ready to catch them and kick them up the arse. Yeah, you heard me correctly. We need to kick them up the arse. Most of us are prone to using the guilt words when we're thinking about ourselves. The shoulds and the must thoughts. I must tidy this place. I should eat better. Should, must. You do it. We all do it. But these guilt-driven thoughts just add pressure we don't need, and they just lead to disappointment. Again, they're automatic. And I'm going to go through a list now of what are called common thinking errors. And don't worry about the name, right? It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. Just listen and see if you're prone to doing any of these. All or nothing thinking. Everything is black or white, good or bad. There's no middle ground. You tend to judge others and yourself pretty harshly. He's an idiot. I'm useless. I'll never get the hang of this. That sort of thing. Then there's catastrophizing. Not easy for me to say. But when you do that, you tend to blow things up in your mind and exaggerate things like how disastrous something will be, how unpleasant they will be. You overestimate the chances of failure. In other words, whatever can go wrong will go wrong. Then there's personalising. You blame yourself for everything. It's always your fault. Whether it has something to do with you or not, you will take the blame. Then there's focusing on the negative. You completely ignore or misinterpret the positive in any situation. You just don't see it. It's like you've got blinkers on to anything positive. Or jump into conclusions. You make negative interpretations before you even have the facts. You become a mind reader, and it's always going to be a bad result. So does any of that feel familiar? If it does, don't panic, because you can change the way you think. I'm speaking from experience because I was a very negative person. And I can tell you the first thing you need to do before you take any sort of action is to realise you're doing it. Like I said, these thoughts are so automatic, you might not even realise you've been doing it until now. This might be the day you go, oh, that's how I've been thinking. Oh, I do that. This might be the first time that's ever crossed your mind. And once you catch yourself doing it, you then need to take action, because negativity doesn't just feel unpleasant, it can actually completely derail your goals, crush your motivation, and leave you feeling physically and emotionally drained. But the good news is, if your thoughts are capable of making you feel like a failure, like you can't do anything, then, with a little tweak here, a little tweak there, your thoughts will be capable of making you feel like you can achieve your goals. You are capable. And they'll help you become the happy wee joy bunny you should be. because that's what I want for you. I really do. And the even better news is it's not that difficult. It just takes practice. So you've come up against a barrier of some sort. Your automatic thought is a negative one. You've just realised it, and so you're now aware of how you're thinking. What do you do next? You challenge that thought. I'm just going to repeat that. When you realise you're having negative thoughts, you challenge them. And I'm going to give you a whole load of ways to do that right now. Start by asking yourself, where's the evidence? You've just told yourself you'll fail. Where's the evidence? Or are you jumping to conclusions? Are you using all or nothing thinking? Then look for alternative views. What would you tell a loved one if they had just had that thought? Any situation, any experience can always be looked at more than just the one way. But we tend to only look at things one way when we have these automatic negative thoughts. So we need to look for alternatives. And now you know about the thinking errors. Find out which one you're making. Maybe it's more than one. But when you know which ones you're prone to doing, it's easier then to catch them and challenge them. And here's a few other ways you can challenge those thoughts. If you're thinking things like, I'm just not good enough, remind yourself, I might not be perfect, but nobody is. Like anyone else, I'm good at some things and I'm not so good at other things. And that's okay. If you catch yourself thinking, what's the point? Well, if you don't try, you won't know, will you? The act of trying will help you gain experience and skill. You don't need to do it perfectly, but anything that you do, it's all part of growing and developing and will lead to achievement somewhere along the line. Are you confusing a thought with a fact? Just because you had a negative thought about yourself does not make it true. Are you predicting the future? Thinking things like, I'll always be rubbish at that. Again, we need to be realistic and look at now. If there is something you don't know how to do yet, you can learn. All these negative thoughts we have a lot in common. They're easy to believe. They are not based on fact. They come to us so automatically, and they make things seem much worse than they are. And they're not helpful at all. None of them. So that's some ways you can challenge your thoughts, but here's a few other things you can do as well. You might find it helpful to start tuning into your thoughts by journaling, if you fancy that, or even just pausing to ask yourself, what am I feeling right now, and why? Doing these simple things can help you catch negative thoughts early on and help you see any patterns or things which trigger the negative thoughts, maybe like the in-laws. Or the next one is something I actually do every day. Surround yourself with positivity. Look for ways to build a positive environment for yourself, and whether that's connecting with supportive people, listening to uplifting podcasts, listening to this one, it's a good start, I try my best, using music or keeping inspiring quotes where you can see them. I mean, that all makes a difference. I'm going to be really honest here and just tell you something. I don't have friends. I mean, I know people, I write to some and I keep in touch with a couple of folk, but I don't have any close friends apart from my husband. You know, the ones that you would invite for coffee or going shopping with? That's not me at the moment. So I use music, podcasts, YouTube videos, blogging, books, my family, of course, my hobbies, and one of my biggest sources of positivity, my garden. That's why I share it on my blog and YouTube channel, because I want people to see the positivity gardening can bring. That really is my biggest thing at the moment. Having said that, it is snowing today, which does bring its own challenges, but that doesn't mean I can't do gardening related things inside the house when the weather's bad. I'm always thinking about the garden, always either planning or using what I've brought in. It's a big, big thing for me, and it brings me so much pleasure, so much positivity, even feeding the garden birds. To me, that's all part of it. That's a huge thing that I do every day, and I make it a part of my day every day, somewhere, even if it's just something small. So look for something that you can do. Maybe gardening you're not interested in the slightest. That's okay. Find something that does bring you that level of positivity and nurture that. And if nothing springs to mind, go and try 100 different things. Get out there, go and try them. Try a bit of this, a bit of that. There will be something that will light that spark for you. There really will be. The next up is the need to focus on physical health. Negativity is harder to combat when you're tired, hungry, you're stressed, and you need to get good sleep, you need to eat well, and you need to make sure you exercise in some way, shape or form. Basically, you need to look after yourself. And if you think I'm saying this because I've got this part of my life under control, you haven't seen my YouTube videos. I'm not saying self-care has slid down my priorities or anything, but I was editing my latest video and I had to cut out a whole bit where the sun hit my face and I looked like the freaking Griffalo, okay? You'll be pleased to know that's now been dealt with, and I will say no more about it. Negativity might feel inevitable sometimes, but it doesn't have to define your day or your productivity. Just by recognising it and using some of the strategies that I've gone over today, you can really get a handle on it and kick that negative butt right out the door. And with that, I'll say a very big positive thank you for joining me today, and I genuinely hope that you found this episode useful. If you have, please share, like, comment and all that positive stuff. Don't forget the links in the description, and I'll see you again next week for another episode to help us all get productive. We're near the end of the season, so please do join me for that. But until then, you take care of your wee self.